Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 of Will's foiling journey. In this video, you're going to see and hear loads of great tips to get you up on the foil and get you into SUP downwind foiling. We've already done 2 parts on podcast and YouTube, and we've also done some stuff on SUPboarder PRO as well, extra features and stuff. So in this part, Will, where are you going to take us?
Well, first of all, we're going to kind of reflect on those first two videos and the comments that have come in from the community about what people think of what we were saying and bits and pieces like that. And then we're going to follow into my journey. I've had a couple of months of time on the water, thinking about it, thinking about gear, thinking about conditions, thinking about my approach. And I think there's probably some hints and tips that hopefully might help some other people.
Definitely. Well, we know they're helping other people because people are getting back, aren't they?
Yeah.
With comments and stuff. So definitely, if you're getting into it, this is a video you want to watch. Again, if you're listening to this on podcast, thanks for listening. And if you're into more content and you definitely want to see more content about this sort of stuff, check out SUPboarder PRO. There's already extra videos on there of the last 2 sessions you've done. And there'll be another extra bonus video linked in with this video on SUPboarder PRO. Won't there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely if you're mad keen on it, and get on SUPboarder PRO. Okay, so recap from last time and the comments that we've got back so far and where we are with your last videos.
So the first thing is that it seemed like people really value just kind of a real world approach, that there's someone real world out there making a video, sharing their story.
Yeah.
People seem to really like that, which is good. So we'll probably keep doing them.
Keep doing them, definitely. I like hearing your stories, hearing where you're going wrong, where it's going right.
Yeah. So that's a thumbs up. Thanks for the feedback.
Because there is a lot of content online and there's a lot of good stuff online, but it's almost too good.
I think so. I think there's lots of content of people doing it who are, top level athletes really. And, I think when you're really good at something, it's quite hard to explain or have empathy with the people who are learning, who aren't just super duper athletes essentially.
Yeah, and you naturally are better at it, so it's easier.
Yeah. So the second point was that there's a lot of people were commenting how they're actually using the shorter, wider boards that we talked around a lot in the second part of the diary last. For instance, Stephen in New Zealand, he's using a shorter, wider board. He's actually using it with a foil assist, a foil drive, and as a bit more of a crossover board, and the conditions he's getting over there, he's like, yeah, I can see that there's a place for these shorter, wider boards in the market. He gets a lot out of it. So that's quite interesting that different people are coming in and saying, oh yeah, actually I'm using what the market's not telling me to use.
So originally we're hearing a lot of noise and a lot of clatter that it's all long length, 7-8 foot by 19, and that's the only way to go. But actually people are using it. That's quite interesting because we thought, oh, maybe it's just this pocket in the south coast or a few people here, but they are there, but maybe they don't want to speak up on social media.
And I think there's a real appreciation that the conditions that you are facing in terms of the wind, whether it's a bay run versus an open ocean run, the location that you're in, all of these factors and the conditions that you're in really do depend on what type of products you need. And that comes down to foils and boards. And there seems to be, a lot of people who are saying, I do this run, I'd never ever use a short wide board. There's people saying that I would use a short wide board. Lots of opinions about foils and what works and what doesn't, based on conditions that people are getting.
Yeah, cool.
There's some really interesting comments as well about passive versus active riding. Now I'm choosing to use quite slow foils and sticking with a pump foil for my use. And there's people saying that, well, as you progress through the journey and you get more familiar with riding those foils, you want to move to more of an active style of riding. So not just going at the speed of the bump, but pumping through bumps and then getting to the next one. And when you see the guys racing, in SUP downwind racing, they're really doing that. They're getting over the bumps, catching new bumps. So yeah, I think that's something to consider when you're talking about different types of kit, different board sizes. It kind of depends what you're trying to do, what level you need. The kit is going to change and evolve depending on where you're at in your journey. There's also some really interesting comments with people saying that the longer sort of 8-9 foot boards that are maybe 18 wide are just as stable as the short wide boards, which is pretty interesting. And there's a really great SUPboarder PRO video where Harry comes in and talks to you about what affects stability of a board. And length does improve stability, but nowhere near as much as width.
Yeah.
And in theory, sort of an 8 foot by 18 wide board is 50% less stable than a 6/8 by 23, like the example, the SMIC example we had in the last video. But that's just looking at the board only and doesn't consider the foil. So when we consider the foil, you get this sort of effect, I think it's known as viscous resistance. So that mast and the foil is in the water and kind of slowing down the tipping of the board and therefore giving the board more stability. Now, I think it's a pretty complicated problem and I'm not clever enough to be able to break it down, but that might make the standard stability equation formula less relevant. But from my experience, from the boards that I've used, if they're 7 foot long and by 19, like this one, they're much less stable than wider boards, even with a foil on. But I've never used some really long stuff, so it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and the other thing to throw in there is rail shape and bottom shape, isn't it? Which you can speak about later with this KT, isn't it? It's an example.
Stability of boards is so critical on so many different factors. I think the biggest factors are that length and width. Well, the width is most important, then the length, and then all the other things can have such a big impact. And so it's really difficult to tell, but it's really good to hear from all the community and what they're saying.
Definitely, that really makes it, doesn't it?
And I think one of the other final observations that I've seen from watching loads of videos, talking to loads of people, kind of getting a bit more involved in the community, is that I think some people, particularly the guys coming across from surfing and prone foiling, just need to accept that they're paddleboarding now and that they need to learn to paddleboard.
Right.
There's this kind of, I think,
resistance.
There's a bit of a resistance, and everyone's struggling around on narrow boards out in bumpy ocean conditions.
It's tough.
And standing on a paddleboard is not as easy as perhaps some people think.
A small paddleboard.
A small paddleboard, yeah. You know, we've had loads of experience through SUP surfing and SUP surf foiling doing it, but I think we're going to talk a lot about in this video about how I've broken down what I need to do, where I need to improve. But I think people coming into this without a really strong paddleboarding background need to maybe just get on a paddleboard without a foil, learn to paddle, get that really good powerful stroke, maybe do a bit of SUP surf foiling, because you know it's super fun. You're going to have all the skills from your prone work to be able to apply to that.
Your balance is going to be pushed. That's why that one I'd bring.
But you'll learn so much from learning to paddle, and it's almost just like accept that this is you're a paddleboarder now. And you need to learn.
The first step is they'll actually be watching this video, won't they, with headphones on in the dark on their own, so nobody sees it, and they'll probably unsubscribe from the YouTube channel, so nobody knows it's in your feed. But it is, and it's a perfect paddle sport. That's the problem with this downwind foiling, SUP surf foiling. It's great.
Downwind foiling is as much a discipline of stand-up paddleboarding as it is a discipline of foiling. It's where the two things cross over, and we're fortunate enough to have done a lot of paddling, and I think that's really helped our progression through it. And there's been lots of comments around that as well in the videos that we've progressed really quickly, but a lot of that is down to the fact that we have got a very good foundation in paddle skills. That's very, very true. It is a very good point. And as soon as you accept that, and as soon as you get out there and do it, you will improve quicker, which is really what people want to do. You just want to improve as quick as, don't we? So that's a very interesting point. Okay, so in your last blog entry video that we did, you had a couple successful downwind trips, didn't you? Some estuary style ones, some out of harbours, Portland. You know, some good ones. You started using a few different boards, and you started going some other foils. But you were boardless. You didn't own or have a physical board at that point, did you? No.
And we have some boards here, very different, very new, very old. So where are you now with the journey from that last video?
Well, as you say, I lost the board that we were reviewing. The guys at Starboard UK wanted that back. So I reluctantly passed it over, and then I was boardless. And then I got a call from some guys saying, we're doing a downwinder, and I'd got a foil because I had the Armstrong pump foil. I'd had one go on it, and I was like, oh right, I'm keen to do a downwinder, but I haven't got a board. And then I remembered this thing, which we talked about in the last video.
Yes, this is, as one of the shop, Dave from Reactive said, is it a museum piece?
It's a bit of a museum piece,
but it's
a piece of heritage.
Back. This is probably worth more now than it was 5 years ago. In fact, it probably is worth more now. Yeah, so the JP Foil 6.8 by 26 wood edition.
So this was our first foil board here at SUPboarder, wasn't it?
So we first started SUP surf foiling with this.
Yep.
And then we learnt to swing foil with this.
Yeah.
And then it got broken.
Yeah.
Will trashed it like he does with a lot of his foil boards. This has all been fixed up. It's now about 3 kilos heavier. And then you've dragged it out and doing downwind SUP foiling with it.
We talked about how, you know, it's 6.8 by 26, 100 litres. It's a little bit wider, some of the stuff. The tail's not quite perfect for it, like those short fat boards that we'd used last time. But I was kind of like, oh, I can take it for the downwinder. It's about 4 mile downwinder. If it's not the end of the world, if I just have to paddle non-foiling, it's a 6.8 board. It won't take too long, and there'll be some wind behind me.
Yeah.
So I thought we'll take it out. So I dug it out the back of our containers and strapped the foil onto it, and went on a downwinder with Blue Ewer and his dad Dave, who runs Reactive, and had a go.
And did it work?
It was a mixed bag session.
Oh, well, I was hoping you'd say everybody should buy one of these.
Yeah.
Forget the new stuff.
Well, so it was Dave's first downwind foil session. He'd used a lot of the same foil, the Armstrong foil with the Armstrong board, but never done a downwinder. Dave's really experienced doing regular stand-up paddleboard downwinders without foil.
And he can SUP surf foil.
Very
foil and all that sort of stuff.
Very proficient in the water in all sorts of disciplines, and he never flat water paddled up. So as we were paddling out to the start spot, we both had a go at paddling up. He got up and he was really happy, and I managed to get up on this. So I was like, okay, this is good. It's all right. Okay.
And just quickly, how much effort was it? Was it physically way harder, or was it you only got up because you know how to get up?
Well, I think it's I know how to do it, so that helps. But yeah, it paddled up. It wasn't really crazy difficult. Okay. The board is a bit heavy. It weighs about 8 kilos.
I'd say you have put about 2.5 kilos on that.
Yeah. So
resin.
There's a lot of resin. So yeah, bit heavy, but bit draggy. The tail's quite draggy as well, I think, but it has got a step out on the tail. But yeah, it paddled up, and we set off on the downwinder. The conditions for the downwinder weren't perfect. The wind wasn't as strong as really we wanted it to be. It was probably only 20 knots. Okay. Sometimes maybe a bit less than that.
So just to recap, if you haven't watched the other videos, which you still should, your last video, the guys you went out with said that you need to have like 35 knots.
Yeah. Particularly, they're doing a lot of downwinding on wide boards. They've just got a lot of wind. So that's 25 plus. Yeah. Okay. So we did a really good run that everyone was loving, and it was 35 knots. Yeah, so pretty windy. Okay, so really under wind from that sense. Yeah. Not a huge amount of swell, but also not a huge amount of wind bumps because of the wind not being really as strong as we wanted. Bit of a mixed bag, but I'm not saying it's writing off the board. I think there's a few factors at play. It was my first session on the foil, and I think I was a bit unused to the power and the lift that foil would create. I hadn't shimmed the tail, which I think actually makes quite a big difference on that foil. I was used to another foil, hadn't winged on the foil, so in a way, as soon as I popped up, I was a little bit like all over the place. Couldn't quite figure it out.
Got a lot of elements that have changed that you haven't used.
Yeah, too many things changed. I also wonder whether the board being heavy probably made a bit of difference, and also I think the board's a bit squishy and soft as well. So maybe I wasn't really
physically under your feet.
Yeah, I mean it's had a lot of holes in it and foot straps pulled out, and it's been used and abused.
Yeah, it has been used and abused. Okay.
So there's lots of things which my conclusion was that I can't really say that that's good or bad. But it worked. I could flat water paddle it up.
I think that's interesting. That is the interesting thing. You know, you've got a board that potentially you could buy second-hand for, I don't know, £300.
Yeah.
And then you could, with right skill, good paddle technique, again, get yourself up into that. You know, if it wasn't in this heavyweight condition as well.
Yeah. But if you knew what you're doing, you could probably cut this thing apart and make it a little bit better on the tail for a downwinder, like DIY it.
Yeah. And when you're flying in the air, take away maybe the slight softness when you're up and flying. If you've tuned in the foil and if you knew how to ride that foil well, do you think the board would have just been fine?
It's hard to tell. I'd like to take it out again. but it's obviously always hard to find the time. But yeah, it'd be good to try it again when now I'm a little bit more used to that foil.
Yeah, okay.
One of the other things that happened on almost my first run with it, I managed to hit the paddle blade into the foil, and it just completely broke the paddle. Not so much that it fell off, but I think the paddle was quite spongy as well. So that plus the wind not really being strong enough, the board being quite wide, meant it was pretty hard to get up because I didn't have the power from the paddle that I was used to. It's a smaller blade than I was used to. That was because my fault. I'd forgotten my paddle. I'd left my paddle at home, so I had to borrow a paddle. I was a little bit stressed because I'd broken a paddle from somebody. But we sorted it all out. It was fine. But yeah, so I think I was in a bit of a flap.
Bit of a flap, but okay. Yeah. Lessons learned, things done, and the board did work, and you got on the foil for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of stuff you learn. Again, people getting into the sport first time, or even like you doing it several times, but you're still learning. Like, where do you put the foil on a box? If you have a new board, where do you stand? Where do you shim the foil? How do you shim the foil? Oh, it's just.
I think in hindsight, if I'd had the time, and I would have if I had the time, I'd have just gone winging on it with the same foil, because I'd have got some time on flat water, feeling that foil and just being used to what that board foil setup is like. I didn't even know if the foil was in the right place in the box.
Just set off downwind.
I just set off completely unknown, and it was a tricky downwind, but still enjoyable. Still got a few little runs, but I was last in.
Yeah, so lesson learned there. A bit more time before you go and do it. Okay, we're going to talk about winging and foiling before again in a minute, aren't we? Because that's another big thing on this chat. How you get to know about boards and linking bumps and all that sort of stuff. But okay, so where did it take you? What have you done next after that then, after that experience?
The next thing I did actually was buy myself a little Christmas present. Bought myself a smartwatch, because what I really realised is that...
You needed to get my emails on the water.
Yeah.
No.
I just wanted to be able to, having kind of dived into the community and seeing what people are doing, I've always been a little bit against tracking on my wrist the whole time, but I wanted to get some metrics to help me know how well I was doing, how far I could paddle or on the foil, how much foiling I was doing in my sessions. So I had like a goal to work towards, or I could give myself targets, something tangible. Invested in a Garmin watch just to be able to track things. I use an app called Surf Tracker, which automatically knows when you're going fast enough that you'll be foiling. You can change all those settings, so you can then work out what your percentage of foil time was. It'll tell you how far your foiling runs are, how much time you're up on foil, all really useful metrics, which we'll come into in a bit.
That is interesting. And okay, you obviously haven't used lots of watches. We haven't done any reviews on any of that sort of stuff, so maybe it's something. If you've used, what sort of stuff do you use actually? I'd like to know. Get some comments below. Let us know, because there's a lot of you out there who do that
I think
stuff.
it's a really useful tool to be able to help you improve, but less important I think in surfing, but in foiling it's got real good potential.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to add around that session or around that time frame?
So the only other thing actually, Blue actually did that run on his race board. Blue's a really, really good SUP racer, and does a little bit of foiling as well. But
so he wasn't foiling. He
was doing it in a old-fashioned SUP.
Traditional training.
It was a training run for him. But he was kind of a bit inspired by
He's probably still faster than you both, wasn't he?
Miles.
Oh, really?
yeah, he's in no time, Okay. So he got a little bit inspired by what we were doing, and he took out a starboard ace foil the week after.
The board?
Yep. But he didn't have a foil, so he strapped on the bottom of it an Astron 1450, which is a kind of a £600 new foil. Yeah. We've reviewed them. It's quite a nice fast foil, isn't it? Actually?
Yeah, it felt quite good. Really. We were a bit surprised how good it felt for the price.
Yeah.
Obviously, and
he was like, I got up, paddled up, did a little downwind run, no problem.
Really?
So, and I just think that's quite an interesting observation when everybody's going crazy about having high modulus mass, having really big pump foils and stuff. Yeah. Like, it is possible on inexpensive gear. Yeah. Yes, Blue is a very, very strong paddler. He's one of the world's best SUP racers. Yeah. But he could do it on that gear that is real budget gear. So if you want to do it on budget gear, my argument would be you can. You don't have to have £3,000 foil rig.
Yeah, which is good. Because there's a lot of good surfers out there don't go foiling because of the price.
Yeah.
Foiling isn't it horribly expensive, isn't it? But there are brands out there and there are ways into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, gives us hope.
Yeah.
So thanks, Blue, for that. Okay.
And then it was pretty much Christmas. So I was doing loads of family stuff and Christmas stuff and all that stuff at Christmas. So there wasn't a lot of time for foiling, but I was going away to Portugal on Boxing Day, driving down to Portugal. So I was ready to.
And you were going to take the JP, were you?
No.
No. Oh, you wasn't.
I didn't
So
want to take the.
What board were you lining up then? Obviously.
I was going to take this board.
Aha! Just happens to have it here.
Yeah. So I was excited to take this board.
So this is for the podcasters.
This is the KT Dragonfly 7x19.
Okay.
It's a lovely board, very light, very minimal board. Doesn't even have a handle, no foot strap inserts.
No.
Very slippery looking board when you look at the underneath of it. Yeah, cool bit of kit. Okay. Generally regarded as, I think, a pretty good downwind board. Yeah, this is the 100 litre one, so not a huge one, but yeah.
Portugal, was the trip all about downwinding, or did you?
No, not really. It was it was a family holiday really. Okay. So with a little bit of surf foiling, and my big focus, I always like to give myself little objectives, was that I wanted to get away from using straps when I SUP surf foiled. Okay. So I can go out SUP surf foiling with straps, link maybe maximum 3 waves. Yeah. But realising from getting into the downwind journey that I need to be able to move my feet because the foot straps are preventing me so much from getting efficient pumps. I can get away with it when I'm surf foiling, but it's not ideal, and I wanted to become better and more efficient. So I got rid of the straps, and it was like learning again.
Really?
Yeah, really hard work.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I went through the pain barrier for a good few sessions where I was searching for the smallest waves possible, which in December and January in Portugal can be hard. Yeah. But yeah, trying to find the small waves, trying to get myself familiar with it, and yeah, it was and really starting to think about how I can develop the skills that prone surfers now have a lot, because they've never had straps. They're not using straps on their boards, and they've got really good ideas about how to move your feet, become more efficient, and all of a sudden I'm having to think about that as well as thinking about my pumping technique. Yeah. So I was really dipping into my contacts to get some tips and hints from those guys. And
how many sessions did it take to feel confident enough in the SUP surfing again without foot straps?
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot.
Yeah, I would say that I'm not as confident still. Particularly in the bigger stuff, because I just find like I'm not attached to the board, which sounds a bit crazy, but like the drop is
all about
scary.
The drop,
the drop's scary, and I'm on a 5'2", 80 litre SUP surf foil board, so I have to take off pretty late.
Yeah, that's another thing as well for the surfers out there. You think it's hard. It's not easy just to again giving SUP a go, taking off late as well. I've dabbled between as you know, I do a bit of foiling as well, and I've done foot straps and not foot straps, and it is a big. Yeah, it's just different.
Yeah, it's tricky.
I'm still glad I learnt with foot straps though, because I found it so much easier to start off with. But it's quite a personal thing. A lot of people out there don't like them or do like them. But
yeah, I think I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, should I have not used foot straps initially?
Actually, to be fair, the first ever boards we didn't have foot straps on. The Nash hovers.
Yeah, they didn't.
They didn't have them, did they?
But I did definitely find foot straps were easy to help you get those first flights, because it took away that element of positioning your feet in the right place. It allows you to do some jumping when you're winging and freestyling. Yeah. You look at guys like Zane Schweitzer, who's SUP surf foiling with foot straps still, and he's doing some crazy stuff like big airs that you wouldn't be able to do on a SUP surf foil board if you didn't have foot straps. Yeah. So
that's one of the reasons why I like foot straps still, actually, because that ability you could just
like
trying back loops paddling out. That's cool. Anyway, sorry, we digress. So yeah, in that trip, a lot of SUP surfing without foot straps, and you eventually got a bit of confidence up. And then, did you do anything else when you were away there, or did you winging sessions, or was it just where were you? Where is it from there?
I did a little bit of winging, and again, the winging was all about I just wanted to learn not to ride straps. I actually did a little bit of riding with just one front foot strap on the wing, because just taking the back foot strap off So 1 foot strap on the front, which I think is a nice compromise with winging, particularly in waves, because you've still got the ability to move your back foot, but you feel a little bit more connected and secure with the board. And yeah, winging's definitely a really, really good tool to help you through your downwind journey. Just time on foil, it's that easy access to time on foil.
Yeah.
One of the big takeaways from that whole thing is one of the things that you can do to aid your downwind journey without even having downwind kit will be start winging without foot straps. Starting to get more efficient pumping, more efficient stances, understanding how your feet positioning is going to really affect the bigger picture.
So that's one thing that, so interesting. You can do straight away to start improving your, before you even got into downwind, before we started doing it,
Yeah, and I think we're going to have some content coming soon that's going to help people understand what they can do there, and some coaching that I've had to help me with some of those techniques that I need to improve on.
Yeah, that'd be really good. Okay, so at that point, the KT, is it still in the bag?
The KT's still in the bag, not being used. And it was never going to be a trip that was going to be very focused on this, but I did manage to get 1 session on it.
Okay.
I was happy with a flat water paddle up session, but I looked for somewhere that there was going to be a bit of wind, so I could have that sort of downwind kind of, just flat water paddle up, see what it was like to paddle up, get my first impressions of how it was to paddle up. See what I could do.
And you have paddled one of these before. Is it the same size you paddled before?
No, I paddled the 120 litre, which I think is about 8.6 by 20 maybe, so quite a lot bigger. And it paddled up really easily, so I kind of thought this would go up pretty easily.
And was it?
Yeah, I mean it's a really slippery board. It looks slippery. Do you want me to turn it over?
Quick. Yeah, turn it over. Turn it over and show people what we've got here.
Yeah, so it's
very rounded up on the front half, isn't it?
Real displacement. They flat it off with this sort of step bottom concept, which allows you to attach the foil on, but allows them to continue this rounded displacement hull throughout. And then this, what I think the shaper calls the dragonfly tail, just help. It's just really slippery. It looks like it should come up really easily.
It looks fast. It looks a bit unstable though.
Yeah,
to be fair, I mean, there's no those big rounded rails aren't going to give you anything on that stability.
Yeah, so my first impressions was that it's a lot very easy to paddle up, much less stable than the starboard board, which is got more secondary stability, I think, from the bottom shape of it.
But on this round nose, remember we were covering it in the last video. It's when it touches down. It's a little bit more forgiving. In choppier conditions. And stuff.
Very, very easy. If you don't quite get your footwork or you're taking off a slight angle, you can kind of recover it because it doesn't trip over its rail and things like that. So yeah, really good.
Okay. So then from there on, so that's your first flat water session with that. Where are you moving? Yeah,
well, the session was really interesting because I managed to get some video of me doing my run, which I had my first impressions and I was like, I got a bit more time, so got some video of what I was doing, and I thought I was doing really well until I saw the video. And
I hate that.
Why
don't you take a picture?
Worst ever, because I basically was looking at that video and I'm like, I'm really, really much too low on the mast. And I think it's because I'm still trying to paddle. I'm still using my paddle, which is stopping me getting high, because when I'm using my paddle, I'm starting to use a longer paddle now. If I'm high enough on the mast, I shouldn't be able to touch the water, but I could still paddle. And I decided I need to break myself out of this paddling thing that I've got so used to. Paddle pumping that my strapped in SUP surf foiling has kind of led me into. I need to break away from that. I need to really think about my technique. So until that point, I was doing maybe 30-second. Couple of 100 meters up on the foil before I kind of completely gassed out. Yeah. I watched the video and I was like,
you've been doing lots of running, have you? Doing lots of fitness. You said about that in your last video.
And then once I got higher on the mast, did a few more runs, got higher on the mast, my watch becoming really useful now, I actually managed to double the time that I was on foil.
Right, okay.
Because I was getting so much efficiency out of being higher on the mast, trying to really forget about my paddle and then starting to focus on my pumping, just using my body to do that pumping thing. And some people might say, well, what's this got to do with downwinding? But I think it has a lot to do with downwinding, because if you can be efficient with pumping, you can open up your downwinding to much lighter wind conditions. Lighter winds are safer, more accessible. You get it more of the time. Yeah.
And I think this conundrum, let's say, maybe with the paddle as a supper, is an interesting one, because we have sort of split conflicts on it, don't we? Like, I still use the paddle a little bit, but I haven't done as much as you now when I'm pumping. But you're going away from it.
Yeah, I'm trying.
So I think still at the moment, I'm not going to say there's any wrong or right.
Yeah.
But it's going to be the interesting thing. Definitely the proners and stuff that are coming into it, and they start stand-up paddleboard foiling, downwind foiling, they're going to be like, oh, what do I do with the paddle now?
Yeah.
And it is interesting watching you. And but you've had better results now, like you said. Not using the paddle. Being efficient with your body.
Yeah. So I think, I kind of got the idea that I needed to really work on some of my base skills that I haven't got, having not come from prone foiling, where pumping and that type of thing is something that you have to learn, because these 4-foot boards take a long time to paddle out if you can't pump out.
Yeah, very, very true.
One of my big takeaways from that was filming yourself. It can be a little bit depressing, but I learned a lot from that.
Yeah.
And I learned that I wasn't as good as I thought I was.
Yeah.
And
you can do it with a fixed camera, can't you? A lot of times. Like if you're at estuaries and stuff, it's quite easy to tripod, fix your camera. Yeah, you might be far away, but you'll get a huge amount of value.
Yeah. All I needed was 15 seconds, and it told me everything I needed to know.
Oh no.
But I was still doing, I was still up and pumping for a good amount of time, but I could really quickly see that my technique needed a lot of work.
Okay, cool. And that is what you definitely are going to be doing, and do more and cover more in future videos, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So then holiday was over. I kind of made my way back to the UK, which was really cold and wet, but perfect for downwinding.
Windy.
Yeah.
They've all been having a windy Christmas.
Yeah. So there was loads of great conditions as soon as I got back, and lined up a local session here, because I really wanted to get out in some downwinding conditions on this board.
On the KT. Okay, so how was that then?
I got the SMACKDOwn.
All right, I expect you to be like, oh yeah, it was easy.
So I'd had an average session on this.
On the JP.
Before. Yeah. I'd had a really good session in Weymouth in 35 knots. And then I'd got another board, and...
Yeah, because, don't be funny, I thought the last session in Weymouth, you looked like pretty much you had it nailed.
Yeah, I felt
you having long runs.
Like, I've completed it.
Yeah, okay, so...
No, I was getting long runs.
What was going on there? Conditions, why is it so...
I think there's a lot of reflection from my point of view with this about how I don't think the kit was helping, which we come on to. The conditions were more challenging, and I kind of knew it at the time.
Let's say, the word.
The Portland setup, where you've got that offshore wind, very, very lined up wind chop, just makes it so much more accessible. Swell makes it really, really, really hard. It adds a completely different element to it that when you're learning, you don't need. You just do not need it.
So is this swell from a different direction, or just swell in general, you mean, when you explain swell about that?
Well, we had ground swell, not too much of it, but there was some of it, and we had a strong 25, 30 knot wind, which was causing wind bumps. Okay. We're also coming into a harbour. There was lots of things for that swell to bounce off, so it becomes quite a confused.
Which is very true for a lot of people, isn't it? A lot of them are by cliffs. You're not too far out to sea. You're going down the coast, so this whole refraction thing is a really common occurrence, isn't it?
Yeah. So we did about four and a bit mile run. The run, usually the swell gets less and less as you go on, and it becomes more wind bump driven. So the opposite to what we experienced in Weymouth. Yeah, it gets easier, and it did get easier. But across the run, I got about 13% foil time, which I was pretty disappointed with, really. Yeah. And I was broken. It was tough. It was really hard standing on this board. Okay. Much less stable than the starboard that I was used to, because I'd used that in similar conditions. Yeah. And it actually felt a little bit smaller than the starboard in terms, same volume, but it actually felt a lot smaller.
I mean, I say really, but it's quite obvious now looking at those rails, isn't it? Big round rails. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually a bit lower volume than it states.
Okay. But, well, it's got a massive cutout on the back.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's really interesting. Again, so it was like a real world of like, okay, this is a really nice board if the conditions are on, all my levels up there. But being realistic, you rather would have had a wider board you were speaking about in the last session.
Yeah, but I think one of the big takeaways for me was that I needed I needed to, once I got up on the foil, I couldn't think about riding high. I couldn't think about turning. I couldn't think about my foot placement because there was just too much going on. There was
survival mode.
Well, you're trying to link up bumps, and I realised that I needed to work on each of the individual pieces of this separately, not in a downwind environment. I need to go away and focus on my pumping technique. I need to go away and focus on how I can ride that big foil. I need to focus on how I can link bumps, and I need to think about my progression in that way, rather than just going downwinding and struggling with it, because it was a real struggle. It was really, heart rate was super high the whole time, sort of
on edge. So you are survival, and you're not mentally enjoying it really, are you? Because you're just trying to get through the damn thing.
I mean, there was some good little runs, but it was eye-opening from that sense that I needed to focus on some of my individual elements of technique.
Because just to recap, if you haven't paddled one of these boards before, and what did you say your foiling time was? 13%?
13%, yeah.
So on a 4-mile run. So most of that time you're spent either falling off it, paddling,
getting blown downwind, basically.
But trying to stay upright.
Yeah.
Not on the foil, which is really hard work on a narrow board, isn't it?
I think
you're probably exhausted at the end of that.
Yeah, it was tough. And I think one of the big challenges was that the swell was making it harder to stand up on it. The wind bumps you can deal with, but it's the swell, as well as those wind bumps that are a bit more jerky, different frequency, made it all really hard. Now, I think this board's great, but I think it just highlights that the conditions really drive how accessible it is.
Okay. So one thing I want to ask about that is a bit about safety and going out and being responsible, because obviously we as well, SUPboarder, we've got to be responsible. Can't have the Coast Guard being called out for a reason that doesn't need to be called out. Have you got any processes that you should tell people now quickly? Because they might be thinking about it. Yeah,
it's a really good point, because one of the things that I worry about most and stresses me out, even when I'm on the water a little bit, is whether I'm going to have the lifeboat out, or whether someone's going to call the lifeboat, or a helicopter is suddenly going to appear. And you look like you're struggling a little bit out there. I was struggling a little bit out there. I felt completely safe, but I'm nervous that other people are going to think I'm in trouble because they don't understand what I'm doing. And it was a Saturday morning. The lifeboat was actually out doing some training. I was like, oh no, hopefully it won't come to us. But like any downwinder should do, we called the Coast Guard, or we're trying to let the Coast Guard know what we were doing before we started the run. And it was actually quite interesting. Saturday morning, we couldn't get through to the Coast Guard.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Quite interesting, because there's obviously no one there. We ended up we were trying to call Falmouth Coast Guard, which is the closest one for us. But we ended up getting through via a different number to, I think, a different office. And the advice there was that you shouldn't ring us up.
Yeah.
You should just use the SafeTracks app. Now, SafeTracks is an app that tracks you. It links, it's RYA app, I think. It links to the Coast Guard, so they won't raise the alarm, but I think it's a tool to help people know that someone's doing something.
Okay, great.
So they can see someone's doing this trip. So a dog walker calls up. It's not they're not in trouble. We know they're doing it. They're doing a downwind. They probably look like they're flapping about, and they're going in the right direction. So it's fine.
Great,
I know Australia have a similar platform, an app-based platform, but in the UK, the Coast Guard are advising us to use SafeTracks and not call up to submit your passage plan. That's
interesting. Okay, so wherever you are in the world, see if there's an app like that. There probably is. That sounds like a great idea. It's easy to do, quick to do.
Yeah.
Doesn't state you haven't got to talk to anybody. Okay, so that's
we'll put the information. It saves the information of your trip, and it's available. We'll show it on the screen here.
Okay.
I think we've probably got a clip of calling the Coast Guard as well.
Good morning, UK Coast Guard.
Hi there. Could I submit a passage plan, please?
Are you on RYA SafeTracks?
Yeah, we can be.
Yeah, we don't really follow passage plans anymore.
Okay.
But if it's all submitted on RYA SafeTracks, that's all that's needed.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, thank you very much for your help.
Okay, so that's good to know. So you're nice and safe.
Yeah, but bit of conflicting advice, I think, because on the downwind I did on this, I called the Coast Guard, and they were quite happy to take my passage plan. And I think if you say that you can't use SafeTracks, they probably will take your passage plan, but they're trying to actively encourage people to use this app as a tool instead of continually having to take passage spans from
I think
foilers.
it's a great idea from like exactly what you said earlier. It's going to make you more relaxed, that you're not that person that's going to get called out, and you've done, you know, and then we can go and we all out there can go and enjoy more of these journeys and push ourselves safely, knowing that it's all been logged, which is great.
And it's a great tool to use, you know, if you're doing a downwind wing, even if you're doing a bit of an expedition on your stand-up paddleboard. Yeah, it's a great tool to use.
Cool. Okay, check that out. Okay, so you said you've got some elements to improve on.
Yeah.
So how did you move forward? What was the element you started focusing on, and how did you do it?
Well, I wanted to spend a bit more time flat water, paddle up into pumping, and try to film myself, figure out what I was doing, try and improve my efficiency. That was one. And the second one is I wanted to go winging on the foil, because I wanted to get used to riding that foil at higher speeds, knowing how it reacts, how it delivers lift. So when I'm in a downwind environment, I can be a little bit happier. And the easiest way to do that is going out winging, getting on the foil, spending lots of time on the foil, doing some downwinding with the wing.
Right. Okay. So how many? So is that what you did? That's your next session, is it?
Yeah. So I did a session locally. I just went out from a beach in about 15 knots of wind. Looked awful for winging. I would never have gone out in those conditions, but I was so excited for what I was going to do, because I knew that it was going to help my downwind journey.
And that was on the KT board, the same setup that you would use for your downwind SUP foiling?
Yeah, exactly the same setup, same foil, although I actually put a rear shim on the Armstrong pump foil, having read that would just help make it a little bit less lifty for my body weight. And just went up and down off the beach, learning. And we have actually got a bonus video of that session up on SUPboarder PRO. It's
dives into all that, doesn't it? Yeah,
and it dives into how I approach that session, why winging is such a great tool to help you learn, how I kind of self-coached myself through the session. I GoPro'd the whole thing, and you can learn a lot about foot placement and how I suppose just tried to push myself. Self-coach.
Yeah, and that's a big thing for you. So you just want to really nail each of these elements, don't you?
Yeah.
And you said that in your last video. So hopefully, do you feel that parts are coming together? Did you feel that session helped you on?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean the video explains it in a lot more detail, but I think I learned a lot from that one session that leads on to the next part of where I went.
Which is okay. So where's that?
I've done some flat water paddle ups and sent the footage to a friend who said that there's some really key fundamental problems with what you're doing with your pumping technique. We can fix this.
Put you down. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I kind of knew that I needed to do stuff, but he said these are easy fixes. We can do this.
Okay.
Let's get a session. Let's film it and figure it out.
And this friend, obviously, he's what is his background?
So Ross is a very experienced kite surfer, probably been kiting since it started. Yeah. He's a very good prone surfer. Yeah. Who's now, because of surf downwinding, he started to SUP surf foil. Right. Okay. So he's kind of doing a bit of everything and doing it well.
Yeah, he's quite happy to do everything which helps him benefit, like you, that end goal. Yeah. Okay, so he's been so he knows how to pump efficiently.
Yeah, he knows how to pump really efficiently. Right, he can regularly link 4 or 5 waves.
Okay, so did you? So is that the next step then? Did you go and see him, or what was the? Did you get him to?
Yep. I went up to Bude, and we did a morning session on the canal where we broke down my technique, broke down his technique, and he taught me the whole mechanics of pumping and how I could improve. And very successful session. Yeah. But we're not going to talk about everything now because it's going to be the next part of this diary.
Oh, he's not going to give
Teaser.
It away. Teaser. Okay, so we've got some exciting stuff to come over the next episode. You've obviously learnt a huge amount. Give us your final thoughts on what you've learnt over the last month and a half or 2 months.
Okay, so I think I'd break it into the kit I use, the conditions, and the approach I'm taking. Okay. Kit, I'm still using a pump foil. I think that if you've got a good pump foil that works really well, I think I'm not really thinking that I need to change that foil yet. Okay. I think, but then a lot of people I know are, I think, jumping off pump foils a bit too early.
And what are they jumping onto quickly?
Just more technical, smaller foils. Yeah. But when I'm riding that, I feel like I've still got loads loads to learn
Yeah.
going at that speed.
Yes.
So I think it's fine to do it. And although I'm starting to think about where I'd go next and why I would go next to a different foil, that foil I think is great for my point in the journey at the moment.
Don't jump too soon.
And to some extent, I feel that it's allowing me to downwind in quite light winds. So this very slippery board plus big foil, I could go downwinding in 15 knots.
Wow, yeah.
Like, and you know, there was a downwind foil race in Sydney a couple of weekends ago, I think, and that was running 10 knots of wind. So downwinding doesn't have to be a super high wind thing. So in a way, I think that foil might stay in my foil quiver for a long time.
Okay.
But yeah, sure, thinking about smaller stuff. But I'm not rushing because I think I'm just trying to go slow, not make my brain have to think about too many things at once.
Yeah. Okay, so conditions-wise, you said?
So conditions, I think it's really interesting. I think what I've learned over the last couple of months, I think downwinding has got so much scope to be bigger than perhaps we thought it might be a while back. I think in a way it's easier to get into it when you don't have real ocean conditions. So lakes, locks, estuaries, south coast UK conditions where you don't really get waves, you get wind swells, so the Solent area. There's lots of people like Christian who messaged us through SUPboarder PRO on the videos. He's doing a lot of downwinding in the Solent. You know, it doesn't get good waves down there, but so it's not necessarily just limited to surf spots and places that get open ocean swells. And I think that's really exciting, and it's easier to learn in those conditions than I think in the conditions with swell, which we've talked about. I found just made it really hard.
Yeah, okay, so that's a big point. And your approach is still going to keep the same approach, which is bringing it all together, sort of thing. Yeah,
and I think it's the addictive thing about the approach. I think you've got to have a little bit of an approach. It's not straight line learning. It's like you've got to go off on this direction to build some foundation skills, and you've got to maybe do a different sport like winging or pump foiling
or supping or whatever.
Yeah, and I think all of those skills, and this is the amazing thing about how foiling is bringing all these sports together, they can all help each other. So it's a really bit of a confusing journey. You've got to think a little bit big picture to get your head around that, but it's not just about going downwinding, it's about developing all the skills that you need to go downwinding.
That's very, very true.
And I think that's what's the exciting, challenging thing, because for me, I'm a type of person who likes to, every session I like to have a little bit of an objective. I like to improve, and sometimes I struggle when I don't have that. Because I don't feel I've achieved anything. I get a lot of satisfaction from that. But if I can go out winging and I can focus on something that's helping my bigger picture goal of downwinding, then it makes me more motivated to do all the different sports.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think a lot of you out there you need to be thinking like that as well.
Yeah.
So I hope you found that video, podcast, and the SUPboarder PRO stuff, when you're watching that, useful. Thanks very much, Will, for talking about that. I look forward to hearing how the journey goes on from there and where you're at and what you've learned.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody who's commented and asked questions. Because we're learning from you as well, and that's fantastic. And please let us know about your experiences in the comments. Ask us any questions. We're all in it together.
All in it. Right. Happy paddling, happy winging, happy SUP surfing, happy surfing.
Bye.
We'll see you later. Bye.
Okay, so the journey continues. The weekend is 16 knots, we think. So not really enough for a paddle downwinder. But what I'm planning to do is get out there and try and develop some of the skills that I think I need to help me progress in my downwinding journey. Gonna rig up, get going, wetsuit on, and head out. I'm just going to run through some of the things that I did and how I was learning as I got used to the kit. Things like foot placements, how I was using the wing, all these type of things. So hopefully you get something out of it. What you can see here when I get off the wind and start riding the wind bumps is that my front foot is still over that join in the deck paddle. It made it a little bit weird balancing, being more vertical over the foil, not having such a wide balanced stance. Took a little bit of getting used to, and it's certainly something that's worth practicing ready for your downwinding. Linking bumps and finding the energy in the water. Now, this wind swell is moving pretty slow, but you can still see that you can carve around, find the energy, This gave me time, my brain time to learn this process.
Really good fun, going up and down, suitably tired. Now we're going to go and have a pasty.